TPIMS. When it was raised in Parliament, I remember...
Is the Labour MP for Perry Barr in Birmingham, would allow them to put their new Archbishop of Canterbury is one who backs the idea, saying radical Islam is imperiling our way of life. David Davis, who was Shadow Home Secretary, is another, writing in the Mail on Sunday that letting murderers return to Britain would allow them to put their new skills to use here. What to do next? And is what we're doing now enough? Mark Reckless is a Conservative MP who sits on the Home Affairs Select Committee. He believes the UK is on track to contain the threat from IS. Welcome to our programme this morning.
Good morning.
And Khalid Mahmood is the Labour MP for Perry Barr in Birmingham, and he's here to warn us that we are not on track. Welcome, Khalid Mahmood.
Good morning, thank you.
How would you summarise the response of the UK to the radicalisation threat, Mr Mahmood?
Well, woeful at the moment, really. I think over the last 4 years, we've thrown away everything that we built up previous to that, post 9/11. The control orders have been binned, and we came up with TPIMS. When it was raised in Parliament, I remember Yvette Cooper saying that the issues with these are going to be a huge problem, particularly the sort of local police that we're going to use in order to try and keep track of some of these people, and whilst we were cutting the police down, and that's exactly what's happened.
So how big is the risk, and how strong is the magnetism of ISISology?
I think it's quite big, and I think, as a lot of people have said, that we've had organisations in the UK for a long time, including Hizb ut-Tahrir, who have been espousing the issue of Islamic Caliphate to be established. So a lot of people have had this rhetoric for a long time. And
longer than 4 years ago, they've been saying.
A lot longer than 4 years.
Mark Reckless, it's a woeful situation, and it's got worse in the last 4 years.
I don't agree with the idea that we've thrown away great achievements of the previous government in this area. I'm not sure how useful actually the party political metric is to look at this.
It's not party political, it's the fact.
Okay, well, there have been some changes. If I may emphasise perhaps 2 changes that I think have actually got better. When I was a member of the Kent Police Authority shortly before the 2010 election, I saw this prevent strategy developing, and I thought it was inchoate and wasn't clear what the government was then trying to achieve with it, and it seemed to include harder edge security stuff, which what I thought should be the focus. And then there was quite a lot of liaison with community groups and sort of handing out grants to particular sort of people locally, and a much fluffier approach, which didn't really seem to go with a harder edge security requirement. We also had a situation where the previous government was drawing this distinction between people who promoted violence expressly and other really quite extreme groups who, just because they weren't on record as expressly supporting violence, were somehow okay, and in many cases got grants and support from the government.
Let's try and put a few bullet points to you both. Number one, to you, Mark Reckless, do you join calls to revoke the British passports of people who are abroad already suspected of being jihadis?
Like 68% of British people in a poll today, I think we should at least look at that. And it's not good enough for the Home Secretary just to say it's illegal. In our country, it is Parliament that determines the law, and we shouldn't allow the European Court or an international convention to rule something out if it's in our security interests.
And Khalid Mahmood?
Well, we can look at it if we've got enough people to man the border agency. We haven't got enough people to do that, and that's why a lot of the people are coming forward. I've been saying about this for the last 3 years, that we need to look at people returning from
but
Syria.
When we've looked at them, we can look at them on a computer screen now, and here's a name for you, for instance. We won't read it out. Would you revoke the passport? Rather than look at it, would you revoke the passport?
If, as they are dual nationals, yes.
Right. Now, can we agree on the figures? Do we know how many British people are out there rallying to the beheading flag of ISIS? Do we know that, Mark Reckless?
I understand the government estimate is at least 500. I think Khalid has said higher. The problem is we don't know, because a lot of these people in Maine, they're going through third countries to get there. There's not a way of direct flights to Iraq and Syria.
But that's quite a good answer. If we're asking for, on behalf of our listeners, what's our track record like? We don't know how many people. Is that the case, Khalid? Remember, we don't know.
That's right. We haven't had the border controls to ensure who's going out, who's coming in, and therefore we have no idea. What we need to look at is, my assessment is based on the communities that I think have been involved in this and what numbers we're talking about.
Well, I think that the problem is we're looking at people. Are they coming back? What are we gonna do with them? And actually, we talked about an example just now of drummer Lee Rigby and Michael Adebolajo, who murdered him. And what the Home Affairs Committee found out when we went to Kenya, we were told by the authorities there that actually the only reason he's not in a prison in Kenya is because our security services asked the Kenyan authorities for him to come back to the UK, and they agreed to that. And then they lost track of him. And I think there has to be accountability for that, and there hasn't been enough so far. And the key of this is enforcement and the police and security services working together.
But are you saying now that if the official who asked for that man to return is still in charge in a senior place of our security, they should be taken aside?
Yes, there should be personal accountability. Right. Supposedly the Intelligence and Services Committee is investigating, but they can't publish the report until MI5 agree it. And we feel that we were misled initially as a committee by people on the British side, and it was only the Kenyans and their senior officials in their Foreign Office who told us, well, actually, the only reason my guy came back was the British authorities asked for him. And we can't keep track of everyone. But in this case, we asked for him to come back, and then we lost track of him.
Khalid Mahmood, can I ask you to turn to the magnetism of the ideology? Should we have someone in government who can answer the question, why do some young British Muslims leave the safety of Britain and behead people? Should we have someone who can understand why those people...
We desperately need to do that. For a long time, what we've done is look at managing the situation. What we've not looked at is a serious issue of ideology, of how these young people are attracted to this. And until we get to addressing that issue, we will still have people being radicalized in this country. And I think we need to take a far deeper look at this and have clear responsibility for managing this and working with clear groups to do that.
We also, I think, need to extol what it is to be British, why we're proud of our country, what this country has done in spreading freedom around the world, saving Europe in 2 world wars, the importance of being a British citizen and the rights and responsibilities that are part of that, in order to show there's something attractive to these people who are going off, and because their lives aren't successful, who are going off to find this glamour or some meaning overseas. We have to give that to them here.
And one of those rights is to question foreign policy. And if you are a young person of any religion or none, and you don't like our policy in one area, you must be allowed to say very strongly, and sometimes on the streets, that you don't like it. And do you think that there's a risk that we're going to move too far, Khalid Mahmood? We're going to misunderstand what we should be saying and what we should be doing?
No, we've always allowed that, but I think to our detriment. In the 80s, we had Hizb ut-Tahrir, Al-Majroon, Abu Qatadah, Hamza, all of these people spouting off whatever they wanted to, and we wouldn't challenge them because of the freedom of speech to do that and not driving them underground. What we have got to do is take a balanced view on some of these issues, and people who want that sort of discourse can have it properly. And I think we need to be able to explain that to some of the young people of what's going on in foreign policy and how they can engage with that, not the fact they can simply turn to taking direct action themselves.
I don't think we should fool ourselves that we can solve this problem through a small legislative tweak, some change in the laws. What we need is serious enforcement, and we've got pretty good laws already. And if people are inciting violence, we really have to prosecute and convict some people of that, rather than just keeping an eye on them, as appears too often to have been the approach in the past.
Thank you both very much. So we heard from Khalid Mahmood we have a woeful approach. We should tackle the magnetism of the ideology, and that you would, both of you, revoke passports. I think Mark Reckler said you said you'd look at it, but Khalid Mahmood said he'd be revoking them. Thank you very much. It's a very challenging subject. I'm sorry that's the time we've allotted. Thank you both. In just about 15